Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So today we're going to talk about something that I think is the playground of the elders of this place that we're visiting temporarily. But first I want to start off with a funny story. So yesterday I'm at my lounge. I'm doing this little meeting with a friend, and then I have to go because I got to go to a buddy's house to smoke. I leave. I get to my buddy's house, and I got a text message that someone walked in. One of you guys walked into my lounge in Huntington Beach, and apparently you had no idea you were in my lounge. And then the subject of conspiracies comes up. The dude who owns the place is like, yeah, we watch conspiracies. And then he says, I watch Deep Thoughts. And they laughed really hard because they're like, that dude just walked out of here like 5 minutes ago. So to the gentleman who walked in, you have to come back down sometime, and we'll have to smoke one out. This episode is about a very interesting set of concepts coming together to strengthen humanity in various pockets. And I might call this something like the Fable Foundation. And this comes from several different angles. What it is, in principle, is that man at the upper levels of man, meaning the smartest beings in a particular area of the world, and every area seems to have done this, and I mean pretty much every single area, they will be looking at society that they have, that they're related to, that they're a chieftain of, king or a queen or whatever, and they realize that chaos is the enemy, because growth and stability creates growth and all these other things. And so they end up saying, okay, we're going to have to have a bunch of logistical things that develop that preserve our life, because you're in this game too with them. But two, in order to advance intellectual identity, you need a story. And whether that story be based on a true story or a true fact or only partially based on a true story, they understand the power of a fable. A parable is different, right? A parable is a story that teaches you a lesson. Those are very important. Those come second. Maybe, technically speaking, in a particular area, the parables came first. But the fables are the fictional past about your people that give you a sense of identity. And in some extreme cases, which we see all over the world, and I don't think I know of any culture that is innocent of this, but again, there's a reason why this is done, so there's really no guilt. This is just a little trick that we do. We all have a perspective that we got it right and everyone else got it wrong. You could even lose a war. You could even have your culture ripped away from you by a different group and still feel like you were taken over by the barbarians because they focused on violence and conquering, and you focused on books and learning and science. Happens all the time, right? Now, so you understand the concept, and I'm sure you've seen this occur, and I'm sure you've got a million examples in your head the second that I mention that. But as I always like to do, I like to go back to the beginning of this problem for our elders. Because the more I play it out in my mind, I understand why they felt the need to create these stories, these fables. It does reinforce your sense of identity, and it gives you this fortification in your heart and your chest and your soul and your gut that you are doing what is right. You don't necessarily have to have anyone else lose in order for your fable to work to make you feel like you got it right. It just is a sort of reaction to meeting people that are different. How many times have you met someone and any subject matter comes up? Well, how do you put the lid down on a toilet? Do you turn your computers off at night, or do you let them run all night? Do you get in the lane you're supposed to be in before you need to use that lane, or you just drive to the last second and then bother everyone else with your lane change? I mean, there's a million technical things that you believe are right and wrong. And you've perhaps experimented with the wrong and confirmed the right for yourself, or you've just been told the other one's bad and you have no idea. Can you imagine living in a world where, unfortunately in 2021 and 2020, we're getting a re-exposure of the feral beings that used to live this way. But you have individuals that have no intellectual concepts in their minds whatsoever. They're simply feral beasts. They have probably three major objectives, which is to hunt and gather, which would take care of their food, to reproduce, and to eat, and to sleep. That's it. Whether they have Nikes on or whatever, a hat on or whatever, that's all incidental. That's just dressing on a pig. Imagine a whole society where we have lost track of all rules, all sense of morals. There's several countries on the planet right now that are pretty much in this state to a ridiculous level. Kids are growing up outside of school systems completely. And they're somehow able to get a gun faster than they're able to get a book. The super sophisticated societies that were tricked into glorifying super duper bad behavior, especially in America during the 90s, what you have to understand is that stuff takes 10, 20, 30 years to trickle down to the third world countries, to the point that no one wants to buy it in the first world countries. The people that create these algorithms, well, they understand everything that it does to the most sophisticated of society, and that it turns a sophisticated society into an ignorant society. And so when they start with a less privileged group of people, they can just differentially calculate how much damage it's going to do to a society that's still coming up. That's why I see snuff movies from Brazil 3 times a week, man. I mean, you could watch it 4 or 5 a day on certain websites. I don't watch them, but I see them. Another Brazil that the thumbnails are unbelievable. I want to see it stop, which is why I go back to look. Plus, they got some funny things on these sites I go to. So you are the luck of the draw. Whatever the case is, whether your immediate family is as sophisticated as you or more than you and that you're growing up into their shoes, you look around, you're like, this sucks. It's a law of the jungle. It's, I'm not safe. Doesn't matter what color you are. Doesn't matter what race you are. Any of that kind of stuff. These are your people. Whoever it is. I mean, this has been going on around the world. Every color on planet Earth. Every race on planet Earth. So believe me, there is no bias with what I'm saying. But you understand the benefits of law and order. If your family's just a good family and you live within their circle of influence, as you enter the world, it can look like utter chaos. But we used to have a time when the biggest man in the village got to do whatever he wanted to do. He was a silverback gorilla, man. If he wanted your mom, well, your dad better either step out of the way or he's going to get killed, or both things will happen. And because we fall in love with each other, because that's the divine connection that we have outside of these physical bodies, we mourn and we hurt and we know that's wrong. We just instinctively know it's wrong. My dad's dead? What? You know? I've said it a couple times on the shows, different shows, but it's sort of when my elders of my church were telling me whether or not Christ really existed and said, well, he may not have existed. This is them. I was expecting them to tell me, like the evidence and all this other stuff, right? But they said before religion, we didn't have structure. And when we didn't have structure, we lived in the law of the jungle. And society sucked. And religion was a way to bring it all together, to give a moral code to everyone, and to abstract away the person who is telling you to have a moral code instead of me telling you to behave because I want you to behave, which there's always a competition between humanity at the lower IQ levels, right? They'll tell you to screw off, and it could just be the kid's young, not stupid, not going to remain that way, but at the time that he's causing all the damage, or she's causing all the damage, they're rebelling, they're going through their rite of passage badly, and so the world goes to crap because they're trying to prove something to someone, right? So they abstracted away to gods, and the first one was pluralism. We had tons of gods, which, you have to develop a belief in gods, and then you can do an atomistic system where you say, well, you know what, guys, it's really just one. Oh, really? Yeah. I'm sure that was really tough. And we know it took thousands of years, and different cultures were in, atomistic, and other ones were in pluralistic. Honestly, my opinion, if you thought there were multiple gods and you went up there and there's only one, I just think there'd be some, and you were a good person, right? You did this thing good for that God, this thing good for that God. The one God would probably be like, yeah, joke's on you, man. But now just imagine that we have to have a situation that either goes one of two ways. Either man at that elder level, and I'm not talking about the male body, I'm talking about just the elders, male, female, humanity at the top. I say that because there's a lot of empathetic amazingness that we know exists in women naturally, and men have to get there, right? But they either serendipitously figure out that this unity, that this moral fiber exists, because think about it, we teach it to ourselves today. As religion is destroyed, it will go away. Morals will turn into laws. And laws don't feel like morals, do they? Morals feel like something that you would want to choose. Laws feel like things that you're being forced to choose. It's like this generation that's there now, they feel entitled to have everyone like them. That doesn't work that way, right? Especially as they're taught to also be some of the most obnoxious human beings on planet Earth. And then we're supposed to feel sympathy for the situation, right? Now, usually, I can think of a fairly clear scenario where something's accidentally discovered, from science to discovery, mathematics, all that kind of stuff being discovered. This one's a little bit more tough. The only thing I can think of in terms of it being a serendipitous mistake, where order is something that we actually figured out had value, would be a society that, like the Egyptians perhaps, which didn't focus a lot on war, but then started getting invaded. As they get invaded, one leader meets another leader. And then they start to have discussions. And as much as the invading leader might be like, we're superior, you're inferior, they might look around at the technology and go, and how did those pyramids get there? And they're like, I don't know, they're not built yet because we didn't mention any of them in our hieroglyphs, so we'll let you know. But at some point, someone figured it out. Someone connected the dots. And then imagine you've got this sort of, and one of the easier areas of history to at least use as an example, whether or not it's all true, who knows, you go back, again, probably just a few hundred years, and all history is probably super duper fractured and revised to the extent we don't know where we're actually living. But we know that Rome was one of the first gigantic societies on this planet. And that's after Greece did its blow up, after Egypt did its blow up, after Babylonia did its blow up, and then a bunch of other pre-societies that we really have no clue about. But that's not going to help us in this conversation, because even though we know Machu Picchu's there, we know nothing about the bigger people that built that place, right? Or the people who built the pyramids after the dynastic period. But if you read about or listen to or do whatever research you want on the Romans dealing with the Germanic races in Europe, because remember, Rome is right down there it's in Italy, right? So it's right there down by the Mediterranean coast. And what's interesting is, although we know it is a super duper powerful empire of history, its numbers weren't absurd. They weren't, 100 million person society. But the Germanian regions of Europe, you've got all kinds of different terrains. You have all kinds of different weather conditions. You have hot winters, cold summers. And so it forced those who live there to be very, very resourceful. Plus, you have different, one, you don't have a coast to just fish. Just imagine the difference. This is just an example. And if any of you know any anthropological data that attaches to this, please share it. But imagine you're a coastal society and you can just trick fish to bite something on a lure. So no matter how bad it gets, you can always catch fish. And then as you go into the wilderness, you could find a really formidable creature and risk your life to kill it. But since you got a bunch of fish, maybe don't. Maybe we don't. Maybe we get chickens. Maybe we get pigs. Something easier, something smaller. If you're the dominant society in a particular region, well, you would think initially someone had to be super badass to create this, to create this group of people that fought off everyone that was around them. You have the super thinkers coming out of Greece, going into Rome. Greece took all their stuff from Egypt. Egypt took some stuff from Babylonia. So the best minds are all within like a circular, probably 600 or 700 mile region. You get the roads, you get the Parthenons, you get these Colosseums, these arenas, these theaters, you get art, you get engineering, you get philosophy, you get all this stuff. And that may be the first 100 to 200 years. But after a while, when you build up legions and you basically gain control over your area, you intimidate your people to pay their taxes onto Caesar, all that kind of stuff, you can go soft. Even though you got some generals that can go out there and conquer new areas, you definitely wanted to keep your soldiers at war constantly to keep them, capable of doing things. But in the end, if the Germanian races, which are a bunch of different races, not just like Deutsch people, German people, if they're up there without the amenities of Rome, they have no running water necessarily. They have bigger beasts. They don't have a coastal region necessarily unless they go up to Norway or Denmark to fish up there. They may be bigger, stronger. They might have kept their minds more fundamental, but very, again, useful. And so when these two start to clash against each other, you're going to have a super duper modern society bumping up against these societies of sort of barbarians, right? In terms of intellectual capacity. Imagine finding, let's just say Rome got to a point of maybe 10 million people. And let's say there's 15 million in all of the areas that turned into Europe. Before Rome really started expanding up. Now they start to see each other. Maybe a Germanian tribe gets his ass kicked by a Roman legion. And they're looking at armor, really cool weaponry, different levels of steel, because they're eventually going to kick somebody's ass, and they're going to drop a sword made of bronze, drop a sword made of iron. And these dudes are going to take it back and go, what is this? This is pretty cool, but can we make any more of these things? And then, of course, that starts to seed intellectual thought. The reason why I'm doing this for you is that we have to totally get our brains backwards to where man was. Now, I think one of the biggest things that occurred for Rome, not so much in Greece, because Greece had its different techniques, which more mirrored Egypt, right? And then Egypt mirrored Babylonia, is that they started to craft, even in Babylonian times, with Anunnaki stuff, this notion of a bunch of beings that were very much like us in terms of physical form, made us in their own image. That kind of storyline was in there. And then it comes to Egypt. Then Egypt is balkanized into states, just like the United States. And every single region has its own god, with its own set of with its complete set of responsibilities. Then as Egypt is consolidated into one country and given its name, now these gods just have one purpose. Take that and move it into Greece. You've got Zeus, you've got his daughter Athena, you've got all these different gods that do all these different things, but there's a top dude, Then you push that into Rome. Rome sort of is borrowing, at this point, the pluralism worshiping of gods. And it was the Dudley Moore's movie, Holy Moses, one of the most funny films he ever made. His father made statues and sold idols, and he'd just make them up. He's just like carving them up, and then he would tell the customer it was a new name, and it took care of like impotency or whatever, just whatever you needed. He just point at one, oh, that's the one you need, because that's what you just told me you wanted, right, to be fixed in your life. So it starts to lose its grip. And so in Rome, similar to the pharaohs, and this is very interesting because we know that this occurred, but I'm not sure any one of us has stopped to think about what this really means. Imagine in the 21st century, someone telling you, and North Korea aside, that they're a god, or their mayor or their governor or their president is a god. And I mean not just you really like him or her a lot, but literally anointed by the universe to run this place. And usually, even though, like take North Korea, the Ung family, you have, or the Kim family, excuse me, the Kim family has 3 generations that are there. They raise their people to think that these are gods, even though they die. It's really strange, right? But that they're gods. And I don't know if anyone actually believes that. They just go along with it because there's concentration camps and a bunch of other weird stuff there, right? Now imagine this being sold to you in the 21st century. Well, that's what people actually were capable of believing back in those days. The Pharaoh was a god. Caesars were gods. Gods, man. Titus Flavius, who presided over probably the single greatest advancement in Rome's architectural history, I think their legislative history, their growth history. There are very, very significant, extremely credible pieces of research that suggest that the worship of Jesus Christ, obviously a concept that had been done several times before Christ existed, is actually Rome tricking you to worship Titus Flavius. Titus Flavius' life and Jesus' life have over 44 complete exact similarities in their storylines. And the rest are the story elements that went back to previous gods from previous areas, sometimes gluing one set of circumstances from one area that the Egyptians came up with, another one from the Greek gods, you know. And when you write story, you see these things really apparent. Like when I watch movies, while I'm writing one especially, or after I just finished one, I just watched, was it Swordfish? Whatever, the one with Travolta. Hopefully I got the name right. I'm seeing, you know, scenes that are in different films. I just watched an episode of El Innocent, and there's like 2 scenes in that episode 6 that are literally in the film I just wrote. And I hadn't seen that before I wrote mine, but it's something that you just do when certain circumstances occur. So we're always ripping off each other's stories. I don't think God would worry about whether or not Caesar was paid his 10%. But that's in the Bible because guess who wrote it? Or wrote that part of it. I don't mean to make anyone angry. If we lose religion off this planet, brace yourself for impact. And believe me, they're trying to attack it from all realms. So when I see little Mormon kids running around on their bikes, or a Jehovah's Witness, or anybody out there going to church, I think, well, thank God that we're maintaining this moral fiber, because it is not being supplanted by secularism, let me tell you. In my opinion, is literally the point of this entire episode. But Rome wanted to switch from legions pounding taxes out of people all the way up to the island of Great Britain, to getting people to tax themselves in the name of God. You're willing to be moral in the name of God? Well, I'm saying to you that there's this, you know, our God brought his son down, all this other stuff, and at the end, you pay unto Caesar what is owed Caesar. It's in the Bible. Does God care if Caesar gets his money? Come on, really? You really think he does? I don't think so. But now, where have we seen societies create stories, true fables, that then accent and complement what's going on in the real world? Like I said a few episodes back, when I grew up as a kid, I thought King Arthur was a real person. A real round table, a real Sir Lancelot and Galahad and all those guys. I did not realize that was a fictional story as a kid. And so as I come out of my Santa Claus phase with King Arthur, guess what? There's still Uther Pendragon in my brain when I look at the royal family. In my mind, I had to literally consciously say, wait. These are normal human beings that were able to convince a long time ago that they were the best of the best. And maybe back, 500 years ago, they simply coveted education. And because, when your grandfather or grandmother figures out something and they tell you this is shit and this is shinola, and that makes a profound difference in your ascension through society, then you will simply know how to run a society because your parents knew how to run a society. If they are also good at making money and convincing bigger, tougher, stronger people to follow them, meaning fight on behalf of them to go get more treasure, to go get more land, to do more things, then they just keep getting more anointed in the minds of the people, but also physically more powerful and financially more powerful to pay people to do what they want done. You ever wonder why castles were built? Well, obviously you could say, well, it's a strategic safe house for the people to live inside, and you wouldn't be wrong. But at the same time, there are plenty of castles in this world that never had any wars fought around them. The Taj Mahal, for instance. It's an amazing building. In its heyday, I guess it was encrusted with jewels, and people, picked them off with knives and stuff since then. But some of the biggest jewels of all time, biggest emeralds, rubies, all kinds of stuff. Well, it was a show of technical ingenuity, of actual prosperity and wealth, and anyone who walked by was encouraged to think, just like the moon missions, that's you. Even though you're not invited in, you don't get to spend a night in it, it's still our people. Look what we did. Whoever built the pyramids, all whatever 100 of them, again, you'll have people that are even Egyptian, but they're here in America, and they only think that there's 3 pyramids in the whole world. It's funny. But when you look at it, even being completely, in terms of my bloodline, I don't think I have any relation to that besides maybe super ancestral bloodlines if Atlantis didn't exist in the Atlantic Ocean, right? Which I'm going to do an episode on Atlantis this year. I still feel the technical accomplishment of perhaps man to build those things and to say, wow, it's still my genome. It's still my species that put that together. And it's totally subliminal fortification to who I am as a person. And so imagine that you float a story. The Egyptians are floating stories. The Babylonians are floating stories. And stories show an amazing evolution in the minds of man. What does it take? It takes a few different things to get a story to fly. Well, one, someone has to think of the story in the first place. Okay, well, take it from a screenwriter. If I wrote a movie that was just packed with suspension of disbelief, meaning every circumstance in my film, even though the places and people are all believably there and capable of existing, what they're doing is just ridiculous, and without explaining things, the kid just flew across the room. Oh, I guess we're watching a Marvel movie? We're watching a sci-fi movie? What are we doing here? No, it's just a movie. If you don't write a good story, then it has to match the intellectual development of your area, probably echoed by the gods that your area worships, any of the rumors that have been going around. You have to base it on everything that is in your demographic of where you're telling the story, the thresholds of belief. And then it needs to mean something to your local people. If you just told a story about catching a fish, maybe no one's interested. As much as you might say it's this big, that may not be that interesting. But you tell a Braveheart story, which is based on a real guy. And I think Braveheart probably has more legs. And I don't mean to insult anyone's stories, by the way. But you tell a story like that to the Scottish people, and the guy that actually laid down his life to fortify the freedoms of Scotland. Huge, man, huge. King Arthur trying to run around uniting his people and then going on this quest for a Holy Grail. What's more noble than that? With Cuchulainn of Ireland, it was a demigod sent down by the gods to unite Ulster and Connacht together to get rid of a huge battle that was going on between a king and a queen. It's important. What was the moral of the story? Well, the land and the prosperity of the people is so important that even the gods will sacrifice their own children to keep it together. So when it's all over and someone starts to do something that's sort of against the people or against the land, everyone's brain before Christianity got there could trigger on the Cuchulainn story and say, you know, we've been through this before. Remember the story of Cuchulainn? And they, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want a God to come down and kick my butt. Stonehenge, we talk about it a lot, right? It's one of the weirdest things. We've got these tribes that were up there, which is not weird in itself. You know, the stones, like I always say, they were moved from where they were discovered to where they are today in 1954. No big deal. No big deal. Had to fix them. But no sooner that they get these things reconstructed, re-erected, repaired with concrete. Who shows up? Some druid cult, almost looking like the KKK, shows up and does this crazy ritual. Well, you know what's funny about that is that all of the archaeologists, anthropologists that studied this, the initial site of it, which was just, again, I don't even know if it's more than a mile from where it started, they had no idea what this thing was, whether it's a celestial clock, whether it's a worship place. They don't know what it is. But now imagine someone walks in and says, no, this was ours. The balls on these people and the idiocy of the locals to allow that to occur. And I'll just give you sort of a silly analogy, right? Pick anything in your local town. Some artifact that nobody knows what it is, but you find it, you dig it out, it's super cool, you reconstruct it, and then the neo-Nazis show up, or some other weird group shows, the KKK shows up and says, this was ours. And then you just go, yeah, well, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do your ritual. This is so neat. Isn't it neat, honey? Oh, it's so neat. You tell them to go pound sand, okay? They have no business being there. You can visit all you want, but you're not going to hold a ritual like you own this place. Oh, this is all yours? Okay, so what is it? Not so much? Yeah, go pound sand. I did an episode a long time ago. I'm pretty sure it was in season 1, but it's about politics. It's not what you think. If you haven't seen it, I think you might enjoy it. Go to deepthoughtsradio.com, click on politics, just type politics in the field there. Search field over to your right. What I do is I take you through, sort of like the television show Lost. You crash onto an island that's pretty big. It's got a nice coastline. It's got a nice internal plains. Got some mountains. Got plenty of food, plenty of indigenous creatures you can eat. And what I do is I take you through time to understand that eventually the people are going to get spread out into 3 groups. The coastal people, the land people on the internal side, the agricultural center people, and then a tiny group of people that's going to coordinate the needs between the 2 hemispheres, being what you might call the politicians. Over time, anyone from the coast, anyone from the plains knows that they have to lobby the people, the 3rd group, to get resources allocated to them. Let's say either like a hurricane comes through and wipes out the plains, but your fishermen are okay. When all of a sudden, a lot of resources needs to be reapplied to the plains on the inside to rebuild them. Maybe lose a whole crop. The granaries are done. Everyone's going to have to live on dehydrated fish or something through the winters. Bad news. But now let's say there's an imbalance. Somebody doesn't educate their children real well in one of the 2 hemispheres, or both. And now they're fighting. And now the politicians have to straighten that stuff out. That's sort of a manual transmission of a society. And I take you to the point where 2 or 3, just probably no more than 2 generations of the political side having children, they're going to be born into privilege of command. And then eventually they might find an island next door with some indigenous creatures and people on it, and then they end up killing them, doing weird stuff, asking for payoffs to get priority in line, and you get a really bad society really fast. So corruption within politics at one level in a primitive state is understandable. Now, today there's no excuse, in my opinion. You know you're being greedy. You know you're being weird. When you go to Hawaii, you learn about Kamehameha. I think I'm saying that name right. The Polynesian leader, I think it was Tongan. I don't mean if anybody. I was told the Tongans were the predominant leadership side, and the Samoans were the more get-it-done group of folks. But he unites all the tribes, Polynesian tribes that landed on the Hawaiian Islands, and eventually, and I don't know if some of it's like a very King Arthur-ish kind of thing. And it could be that certain people existed, but their stories were so without a printing press that everything gets a little crazy. And sometimes we know that things were probably not true, but why not believe it? Because by the time it's so polished over a couple thousand years and you find the lore of it all, the fable of it, no one's negative anymore at these areas. No one's fighting anymore, so it's okay. But if you are to be raised with a sense of identity, that's what fables are for. It fortifies the good and demonizes the bad in almost every single case. Whether or not your society is messed up, that's a whole different thing. I doubt that Brazil right now has some fable that is all our old or past leaders were all teenagers and they shot each other constantly and they, did horrible things. I doubt that that's their lore, but that's where they are today because the banks destroyed them. Because their leader 10 years ago dared to drill the oil off the coast of their country. The IMF swooped in, got rid of that guy, put an IMF shill in to run their country. Then she was out in 2 seconds. They were automatically in a food shortage, an energy shortage. I mean, it's awful. And it's not their fault. It's a hell of a thing to think that you would be a being that is drawn to truth. You want to live for truth. You never want to be a part of a lie. But you're rewound to potentially 10,000 years ago, let's just say, in a particular region of the world. Doesn't matter where. You, for whatever reason, were born with an old soul. Again, you had an influence around you that showed you the benefits of order. You go out and see the suffering of chaos, even if it's minute, and you realize, man, we got to do something here. We have to find a way to manipulate people, to convince them, to get them to buy into order. Well, pretty much the equation goes like this in my experience. And there's all kinds of books on getting buy-in. I own a few of them from the 90s as I was being a young businessman. And you have to sway your upper management sometimes to do what you want them to do. Not for any stroke of ego, but because you believe that's literally the only way to get it done and save money and make more money at the same time. But it's always a formula. It's always a formula. There's really two pitches to the whole thing. If you're selling a product, what you want to do, this is low-hanging fruit stuff that I don't think is really necessary if you really know your product. You don't need to do this, but it's the someone else has to lose for you to win pitch, which is you pitch the problem in society. You pitch the current understood solutions for that problem that don't work right, that have side effects. And then you swoop in, you let it hang for a few beats in the room where everyone's like, oh dear, that's horrible, right? And then you swoop in with your solution. But guess this, check this out. Boom, boom, boom. You pitch your product and all this other stuff. And they're like, yes, absolutely. That's old-fashioned. The other one is to simply convince someone that they can gain something by using your plan. Everything's fine. It's fine. They're good. You could have died that morning and their life would have been pretty okay. Maybe even blissful if they didn't know what they could have gained by using your products in your mind. And this is all just the foundation of selling a fable, okay? But you convince people they can have more of what they want. That's how they get a lot of celebrities to cross the threshold of really, really bad things. They have low IQs. They're convinced, they're told they have high IQs. That's the funny thing. And then they have their low IQ turn into a dagger of goodwill and stab right in their back, and they run over and burn their soul right to the ground. So how would you pitch someone to get more? Well, now, what's really strange about it is no matter how bad a society has ever become, there were a group of people that accepted it. It's a controversial statement. I've been really thinking about this lately because Big Herc did a video the other day about sort of the conditions of which the slaves were brought to America. And then he did a video a day later or two later, and he said, you know what, I forgot to tell you guys that a bunch of black people got to America without any slavery at all. That there were black people already here before the slaves got here, and they were free because they were creative, they were intelligent, they came from different areas than where the slaves were being captured. And so Kanye West said once, he goes, slavery for 400 years? He goes, 400 years? Sure sounds like at some point it was a choice. And, it's a controversial statement. It's a really high-end idea that at some point they should have just rebelled. It's food for thought for a white guy, let me tell you. But I think what Big Herc said was very, very important because he said, look, you shouldn't view yourself as being this inept being on planet Earth that was capable of being captured by the Arabs / the Dutch and then brought to America by the Norwegians, the English, the French, the Spanish, and the Dutch. And then they went all back home. The people that brought them over were in a business. They brought them back over. Who'd they sell them to? They sold them to the European infiltrators who had enough money to build a plantation. If you're just an average immigrant from Europe, your family didn't have that money to buy a plantation. You were on the upper end of the deal, man. So there simply weren't that many. You just go do a little bit of research on plantations that existed in America. You will find very few owners with a ton of land because they came over rich, and some of them were ambassadors from companies. They were just like J.P. Morgans who worked 100% for the Rothschilds. J.P. Morgan dies and he has like $2.5 million in the bank, and forget what you've ever been told about his wealth and his value. He was using Rothschild property the entire time. So when he died, he didn't know any of that crap. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter if there's a bank with his name on it. That's a Rothschild bank now. Okay, it always was. But that's how they do what they do. And again, I think that I was shocked when I was doing some research about the price of a slave in the 1770s. Like the lowest end slave was like $50. Okay. I don't know, that's about 50 grand. And then the highest one was like $500. I mean, it's just unbelievable amounts of money to buy these slaves. No one had that kind of money coming over from Ireland or, anywhere in Europe. I mean, just coming over. They're broke as a joke. So careful what you believe in those realms. So you have a fable that will be negative, like everyone in America owned slaves and every black person in America was a slave or descendant of a slave. That's unfair to both groups. One, it makes one group feel inferior and one group feel both groups feel inferior. One was intellectually inferior for supposedly purchasing these folks, and the other ones were intellectually inferior for letting themselves get captured. You're not the people that you're related to. You have your own life and your own experience, right? The fable of Christopher Columbus. How many times we got to listen to this story of this dude discovering the Americas? And then you just change the channel a couple times and they'll have a whole new documentary. It's how the Vikings got over here first. And then someone else goes, there were already people here. Already people here, folks. So who discovered what? What's also interesting is that I watch a lot of archaeological and anthropological videos from folks that are professionals, degreed individuals, and they will take videos everywhere they go in the world, from Africa to South America, really eccentric places in the Eurasian region of the world. And we'll find these tribes that are fairly, I don't want to say primitive in any way, shape, or form, but they still hold on to their tradition. I grew up in Native American country. You would still see Native American dances. And so they're trying to keep their lore alive. Well, in one way, it's a fable. But it brought a level of cultural identity It allowed them to organize their people in a particular way. Now, the Native Americans mirror the tribes in South America, the tribes in Africa, and probably a little further back, the tribes in Europe. But of course, they had a lot of evolution super fast for whatever reason. Like they got the wheel, that sort of thing. So when you live in a Native American area of the world, the Midwest of the United States, and you see that the Cherokee have one set of traditions, the Neosho, the Sedgwick, the Apache, all these different folks, the Shawnee, there's just a bunch. But they have similar things and they have different things. Some tribes, most of the tribes never had any belief in the devil, which I think is cool. They also believed in a tree of life. They also believed the earth is a mother. They believed if they ever killed anything, that they needed to totally consume every last bit of it for one reason or another, whether it was leather, jerky, horns to be used in various capacities. They didn't waste none. They wasted nothing, right? Well, we know in Africa, it's the same way. We can see it. And it's interesting because it allows us to go, wow, those folks have created a set of beliefs that 100% serve the purpose of their culture, help them integrate with their immediate surroundings, right? Because you have some tribes that go to work and work on computers in Africa, and you have some tribes that still use a particular mud to cover themselves and wear beautiful beads and have these crazy, amazing tattoos, some of them made out of burn marks, some of them made of ink. It's all intoxicating when you see it because it's pure nature, it's pure balance, and it's a time capsule. And there's nothing wrong with them, right? They're in total balance with nature, and we're worried about how many inches our LED screen is. So the reason why I really want to drive this all home to you guys is to make sure that you understand that as we fiddle with the past, as we patronize the past and think, oh, how silly they were, there was a reason why those things were created. And they weren't created because it was negatively affecting the societies that created them. It is literally the pillars, the scaffolding, the spine of those civilizations. And if we were to ever be stuck in some fallout world where there's some, I don't know, cataclysmic virus that's dropped, some nuclear war that happens or something bad that occurs, and you find yourself on the other side inside of a Fallout world, which is a video game for those of you who don't play, you will have to pass this on to whoever's alive. And you're going to have to create something that is going to make people feel good about themselves and imbue them with the moral fabric to not go with their instincts all the time. It was the whole basis of Walking Dead, Rick, believing that we could keep the fables of our past, who we are as human beings, all of our moral codes, all that stuff. And his buddy said, dude, that time is over. Shane, right? Shane was right, unfortunately. But the problem was that Rick, this is obviously a fictional character, but if you were to role play up Rick's world, or Rick's attitude towards the world where everybody's still zombies, the problem with Rick's plan was, and I think even the short-sightedness of Shane, which had to have been written to the characters exactly the way they were. There's nothing wrong with the way that thing was written. Trust me. It's a masterpiece for the first 2 seasons at least, right? It was that Shane needed to say, look, dude, I hear you, but we got a lot of zombies right now. And there are hundreds of millions of zombies in the world. Until they go down in number, for whatever reason, they rot completely out. We shoot them all. We find a super weapon to kill them all. We're going to have to put your little idea on hold for now. Because we have a common enemy, which is the zombie. We don't need to walk around the world. We need to hunker down and find a place of strategic defense, perhaps a mountainside, something where zombies can't crawl up. But we can kill them as fast as we need to with something that has no ammunition. a board with a nail in it, a board with a sharp spike in it that has no ammunition. You can just keep hitting them in the head and they all die. And then just play music until they all come and you just kill them all, right? Of course, in was it World War Z? It was a little more aggressive. Because you probably have gotten to a point in your life where you're sort of looking at the world as you've become more enlightened about society and psychology and sociology, both sides of things. You look at yourself, you look at other people looking at themselves, and then you look about how we have this sort of mob mentality, which 2020 has shown us how utterly fragile we are as a society. We have only convinced ourselves that we are civilized. We aren't there yet. I don't think we're even at level 1 yet. We have such an ignorant society globally that they can just be told something exists and suddenly it exists in their mind. It's really that simple. And then they could have things that have always been occurring in their life forged over into this other category with a different name. The statistics of what has always gone on in their life the entire time they've been alive is erased to zero. This new one that's never existed has the exact same statistic that used to belong to this other bucket, and they believe it. They gag themselves on their face because they believe it. They put an experimental regimen inside their body because they believe it. Unable at any point in time in the sequence of their life during this last 14 months, are they able to pull back, take a look and go, wait a minute. It was an interesting report card that we got. It's almost like you take your old car and that you haven't started for a little while, or that you've been driving to death because you're like a traveling salesperson, and you take it into the garage and you're like, oh, please, God, tell me it's okay. And then they come back with a giant list of things that are wrong with it, and it's your buddy doing it so you can trust him, right? You need to replace everything in this car. This, or you should just really probably buy a brand new car. And it breaks your heart when you look at how injured the thing that you thought you loved, or maybe you do love, is injured. The one I struggle with is the love-hate relationship, and hate is not the right word, but the religion in general. For those of you who watch all my episodes, this is not new to you, but perhaps me putting it on point here will further explain it to you. I love the fable qualities of several religions in this world, from Buddhists to gurus to Christians. One of the most spiritual weddings I've ever been to was my cousin's wedding. She married a Jewish kid, and the wedding was just so family-oriented. It made white weddings look like mosh pits, man. It was beautiful. It was amazing. But there, I know, are more out there. So I can see the value of this system, of these systems, the system of religion. At the same time, I want to live for truth. So I'm sitting there going, okay, I have to adjust in my mind, okay, sort of my relationship with God. Someone asked me today in the comments, and I'm glad that he said something. I think it's a he. He said, I dig your episode, but I can't understand at this time stamp, you still give flat earth people sort of a leg to stand on. And you make a couple comments, saying, well, you don't feel like you're going really fast on planet Earth and all this other stuff. It's like, how could you do that? And my thing is, okay, keeping an open mind is a daily chore. That's what I have discovered, not what I just believed out of thin air. I've discovered this. It's a muscle inside your mind. I don't believe Pangea drift. I'm an expanding Earth person, and I have not seen any proof myself that, I've been in space and seen a flat disk floating out in space. So I'm not a flat earther either. I'm an expanding Earth person. I think it's 1,000% right in front of your face. But I also can think, okay, well, maybe this is all just in some celestial supercomputer. What I refuse to do is find another reason to hate my fellow man. That's an F+ on your report card. Getting all butthurt and angry about something that is so sort of ancillary, like how could you get so pissed off about something that's kind of fun to think about? It's just fun to think about, man. Who's going to kill you in the middle of the night? What intelligence agency is going to sneak inside your yard, stick inside your house in the middle of the night, put a shotgun against your head and say, What shape is the earth? What super hot, amazing person, female or male, that you would be attracted to is going to sit across from the dinner table and hear you offer up the funny notion that this place could be a tetrahedron or something, and you just have never been in space, you don't see it, but you have an open mind, and if that person dumps you, then they're not cool enough to be with you, man, right? So don't worry about that kind of stuff. I mean, that's just my advice. And I feel like the one stage that's going to occur with my life is I'm going to, at one point, whether it's an Ethernet cable or a face-to-face meeting with the central consciousness of this universe, I'm trying to make sure my report card is as good as it could possibly be. Because I'm not in a desperate situation where I'm in a feral state of being where I might end up killing someone to eat. I'd probably just die. Be like, oh, shit, I don't need food. Well, time for me to go. If I ever gain massive wealth, I'm not going to become some sloppy rich guy who's, let them eat cake kind of person. I will invest every penny to build companies and ventures where people who were unemployed can get jobs and totally love what they do and have their insides align with their outsides, meaning this is what I wanted to do and this is now what I do for a living. And when I was down on myself, or the luck or my inspiration was down, the dude came over to me, said 4 or 5 words, and poof, I felt better. And I went off and did something I didn't think I could do. I saw Steve Jobs do it at Apple, and there are ways of doing it even better than he did it. But now put yourself in that scenario where you are in some apocalyptic world. It's over. Whatever happens, over. If it was a virus, you were immune, and everyone else who was alive was immune. If it's a nuclear war, well, they blew each other up. If there's any radiation, you don't seem like you're puking anymore, and you're okay. Maybe you just have a magic resistance to it. Maybe your area of the world didn't get blown up, but for whatever reason, you have a mechanism to live. The brilliant thing they did inside of the Fallout universe was they did create religions. New ones. They had one that was the Children of Adam. And it was this weird cult that got together and was actually worshiping sort of the atom bomb that took out the world. And why not? It was the most powerful thing. It changed the world. And so they became a Stockholm Syndrome group of people to the nuclear bomb themselves. I mean, it was utterly brilliant inside this game. Fallout 4 is, again, so gigantic that you probably won't see all the content in your lifetime, no matter how much you try to play the game. But they even had a silly group that thought they were going to get into a spaceship and fly away. And the spaceship that they thought existed was at an amusement park, and it was one of those rooms that spins around, you get thrown against the edge, right? But it looked like it was literally designed to be a spaceship. I've been in one that's exactly the same design. And they thought they were going to get in this thing and be spun around. And they actually, I think at some point you do get in it and everybody dies in the thing because it spins around so much they just get crushed. Whoever designed the game understood society, understood sort of the fundamentals. Now think about America during the 1800s. Beautiful time to study this exact thing. But they had a cheat sheet called Christianity. Our local regionalized or regional belief system, whether it's true or not, it's powerful. So you have the East Coast of America pretty much gaining all of the exact amenities of Europe. New York blows up, Boston blows up. And so the coastal regions get really exploded in a way that you would probably feel after probably by 1800, let's just say. You could go from London to America, as long as you stayed on the East Coast, you'd feel pretty much at home. Start venturing west. Oh, now you get into like Native American territory. A bunch of battles still going on. You get to little towns that eventually show up in the mid-1800s. You get your Tombstones, your Deadwoods, your Dodge Cities, and a bunch of others. Some towns had no problem keeping the peace, and others were just Wild West, man. Some towns you could wear your sidearm. Some towns had signs right at the very front that said, as soon as you enter the premise of this town, you need to go to the sheriff and turn your guns in. And then when you leave, you can take your guns with you. But there was one big difference in the towns that had some moral fiber and the towns that didn't. And people don't understand this history a lot, or they don't pay attention to it. Let's say you're a settler. You're Tuco and Blondie, and you're heading into a town. There was one thing that you looked for in the town to make sure that the town wasn't going to be a problem. And if you didn't see it, you knew you could either go around it or you could go into it if you felt like you were a tough hombre. You looked for a steeple. You looked for a cross on the top of a building, aka a church. If you saw the church, then you knew that these people had, one, developed the town enough that they got to the point where, after all the strategic resources, they built a church for their spiritual compass. Once you've got a preacher and a church, then you had some level of order. If you had a Catholic church, you had major systems in there that went back 1,800 years, at least on paper, the Fable. And that's good. My hometown has, I don't even know how many of them are functional. I think quite a few of them are still functional. But there must be a dozen churches in my little town with 10,000 people. And it used to always kind of like, I don't know. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand anything I'm telling you right now when I was a teenager. Not a dime of this, right? And so some churches would feel kind of icky. It's like, oh, those religious people, right? And I didn't have anything against them at all. But I just knew that's where the preaching happens. And if you walk in the hemisphere of the front door of that place on a Sunday morning, which is typically the only time they really met, you were in for it. The Catholic church on the south side of town, I guess on the east side of town, that had a school in it where kids went to school. My mother went to school there for, I think, her K through 6th grade or whatever. Everyone comes out scarred, But the other thing was that my town, from about, I guess, 1860 and up, you don't have any major incidents of immorality in the town. We did have a gangster shootout with one of those really famous gangsters at a convenience store. But that dude came in the town, robbed the place, they had a gunfight, and then he left. He's one of those super famous ones where it was it wasn't Bonnie and Clyde, but it was the other group that was like a Bonnie and Clyde. Some of you will know that guy's name. I completely forget it. They tore down the building that this shootout happened in and just left it a blank lot. I mean, so stupid. And I don't know if you guys know this, but bricks are often recycled. They'll take down a building, and then even if they knock the wall over, they'll pick out all the bricks out of the mortar and sell them to people because they have they're historic, they'll have prints on them, and a lot of them have the years that they were made on them. But we had bricks that had the bullet holes in it, and these are like famous bullet holes, I do think it's been understood now that this is a business. And I don't mean from a financial standpoint. Sure, there's financial rewards if you say you dug up, there's pharaohs inside the, Grand Canyon. You have to have special access to get to it. I was just having a detailed discussion with a friend of mine who's Arabic. She knows all about this place. But if you have a society that is struggling to either recapture its previous amazing history, but for whatever reason, through massacres, through paranoid leaders, they had all of their intellectuals killed, then they really do gut their society. It goes from being a society that creates a wonder of the world to a society that is like, wow, you're carrying water to your homes and it's 1920. You have no running water. And so it takes a while for those countries to get back on top with their new, freshly manicured folks that were of a lower IQ to kill the higher IQ people so they wouldn't have the bell curve problem. And then then that lower curve goes up. It's sort of a natural thing. It goes up and up and up. And they could even exceed the intellectual capacity of the previous group. Or at least pockets of their country might do such a thing. But then they realize, oh my God, our relics, because we had this sort of missing link stage to our history, to our development, because of all of our self-loathing massacres of our own people. We're behind the rest of the world, but we know that today we're pretty formidable. But without a fable, you will always feel like you're, remember the designation of all the class structures, where we have lower, middle, and upper class, right? But in each one of those, you have lower, upper, middle, upper, and upper, upper. The major difference is if you grew up like me, an average kid, and you make $1 billion like a Jeff Bezos, he will die, no matter what, a lower upper class person. Why? Because his money's new. Who is an upper class person? Well, the Windsor family, the Habsburgs, the Rothschilds. I'm not even, J.P. Morgan technically would have been a lower upper class person. We don't need to think about this as enforcing this in society, but it allows our brains to have an intelligent discussion about who we're talking about. And sort of the manicuring of this. And I've actually got friends of mine who were upper class, and because of some bad management of money are, I don't know how you say it, they don't have the billions of dollars anymore. They don't have the huge power structure in the world that they used to. I mean, I got a friend of mine whose mother financed the World Trade Centers, her family. But her grandson, who I'm friends with now, I'm pretty sure doesn't have that kind of cash lying around. Whatever happened, it disappeared. I don't know if he goes down a notch. Does he go down to upper middle class? I mean, from what I understand, I mean, his financial capabilities are more of upper middle class now. But if you want to instill in the hearts of your people a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment that goes deeper than just today's accomplishments, history is where you can create that from scratch. Either be it you dig something out of the ground that's legit and you say, wow, that's our DNA. Look at that. Or what I think is occurring now in some areas of the world, as I noted in a previous episode recently here, I think they're burying things. I think they're creating things, burying things, and digging them up and going, see how brilliant we were? And if you go, hey, I'd like to get a copy of the steel, the metal, the pottery, and to put it in a electron microscope and see just when this was built and how this was built, you're never going to get access to it. That's why I think so much of Egypt is still buried. They don't want to dare dig it up because it will simply prove that whoever built that place, it was a whole different species of folks, man. I don't mean species literally, but just a whole different group of folks. North Korea, super duper interesting example of a fable being created 1953. I don't know why, but this country has been utterly fascinating to me. I follow Yaomi Parks, the woman who's a defector. I think her information is sort of, some of it's from firsthand viewing of events and other stuff. It's kind of silly, but she's very powerful with her videos and most of the time. And then you watch Dimple again, which is the group that interviews defectors. But when you hear about the lore that they have invented for the Kim family, it is unbelievable. Okay. And this is all since the 1950s, all right? Apparently, the history that they teach kids that foreigners are not allowed to see, they tell you that, and the grandfather's name escapes me properly, but the grandfather, Kim, is documented as teleporting all around Korea and fighting that war by himself with essentially the power set of a Jedi, of almost Jesus himself. And in their mind, they said that they're taught that Jesus wasn't real, but he was said to do all these things. And the Kim grandfather was real. We knew him. We saw him. He lived to be an old ripe age, and he's real. So it's very interesting the way they move those perceptions around. The middle one was a Kim Jong-il. I think he's the center one. It's Il Song is the father or something like that. Anyway, they needed to create a lore behind the grandfather when he finally got into power. And so the fable goes for him, and I'm pretty sure he had siblings, but they said that he sat on his father's knee while his father was fighting the Americans. And he was giving commands as a child to his father as to how to run the battlefield, so that when he became powerful, that was his past, that was his fable. More recently, you'll have things where Kim Jong-un, the son, the grandson, they do kind of funny ones where they'll say that he walked up a mountain. He's had this huge ski resort built, and he needed to go up to the top of the highest peak and then look over his construction and bless the whole thing. And they created this weird photo op where they show him walking up about 30 feet at the very top in these slick leather shoes, which is really funny. Again, all surrounded by SUVs that took him there. And they said that he he's about 5'4", and he weighs probably about 280 at the time. And he supposedly walked up by himself, with these shoes. He's this miraculous superhero. Okay. At face value, whatever. It doesn't hurt anything. What they end up doing to their people, that's a whole different thing. But don't think that they're doing this just to create entertainment for their people. They're creating a sense of value if you buy it. And, if that guy, some of the lore there, just to put it in perspective, and I'm sure if you ever met Christ, you would do the same exact thing, at least for a little while. This dude shows up randomly at places, right? If that guy shows up at your house, then you are considered to be the OG human of that neighborhood. If he walks into your house and sits in a chair, ain't no one else ever sitting in that chair ever again. You will have that chair, and this is done in several schools, hospitals, businesses, homes. If he ever sits in a chair, that chair is encased in plastic, in like Mylar or something, and ain't no one touching that chair ever again. People have said that if he shakes your hand, people won't wash their hands for a very, very long time. Can you imagine? That's how powerful this is. The mythos, right? Another great, just saying the word mythos triggers my mind to point at probably the number one. I don't even know what Joseph Campbell was probably your preeminent. He's everything. He's a philosopher. He's an anthropologist. He's a philosopher. I mean, he's just everything, right? I think I said that twice. He went and researched the mythos of every culture he could get his hands on. And he studied the value system of these fables, which is why when he died, I believe he was probably a pretty calm atheist at the end of his life. He wasn't a negative atheist. He was just, if you ever watch his speeches, there's a lot of them videotaped on YouTube. If you ever watch the guy, he's a very mild-mannered dude, very respectful. And it's like he understood the value system behind what I'm saying way more than I ever will understand it. When you write a film, depending on what kind of subject matter you're getting into, if you're writing a film that affects a society in any way, shape, or form, you are to invent your own mythos, however macro or micro you create it. Think about the mythos of Godzilla. Well, when Godzilla shows up on TV in Japan, I don't remember what year that was or what decade that was. Obviously, by the 60s, he was roaring hot. It's new, but it's still built with a mythos that been in the ground. He's been here forever, like a dragon that's been sleeping. There's old fables where the Uther Pendragon is the sleeping beast that is England. It's his back that is the fabric of the world and of the land. And again, without jets and boats and the ability to get away from your land, that island's your whole world. America would have been the whole world. In fact, even just a little state might have been the world of a particular person. Like I said, I'm not sure my grandmother traveled outside of Kansas. I don't know. I don't know how far away she'd ever been from her hometown in her entire life. I forgot to ask. You just assume when your father takes you traveling all around the world and the country that other people do it too, and sometimes they don't. We see Godzilla today. I mean, think about it. Even if you haven't watched every Godzilla show on TV, he's an heirloom to that science fiction. He comes with just a massive story behind him, right? And with him, it's fun. With him, it's like, oh yeah, Godzilla. Mothra has one. King Kong has one. King Kong was on that island when he was discovered, right? He had been there forever. How old is a King Kong, right? Obviously, he starts off small and he gets bigger. And where's his girlfriend, I mean, really. Wasn't there one that he had a girlfriend or something? He's the last of his kind. Kind of makes it sad. But if you think about the globe of the world, just think of it as a way to shape everything so you can see it. Hell, make it a flat disc, doesn't matter to me. Think of continents and think of the overlay of fables, the balkanized organization of fables all around all these, like the rainforests of Argentina have tribes in there we barely ever talk to. The Peruvian natives, they have their own thing. I don't know what it is. New Guinea ones, they have their own thing. But Australia has its, America has hers, whatever. China, Japan, Russia, all of Europe. Previous civilizations that are gone. I mean, what's interesting about it is that as America, used to have Native Americans as the only residents, and then the Europeans came over and the slaughter happened and we took it over. We now have Christianity on top of America as the predominant religion. Okay. Take Egypt, though. Very, very interesting. I have personally never heard of anyone in Egypt worshiping Ra still. Anubis. Set. I mean, whoever. I don't hear about people walking in the temples. They live there, man. Some people see the pyramids of Giza every single day they've been alive. But they don't believe any of that stuff anymore, but they still live there. And according to, official history, they're the ones that built it all. Well, I mean, forget what's real. They think they did. So why don't they still believe all that stuff? Was it the power of suggestion? Did they finally see perhaps the absurdity, which I think is an insult to the whole paradigm of any fable? Why is theirs absurd and someone else is okay? Why is the miracle of one God completely believable and the miracle of every other God is just silly and ridiculous? What do you mean you flew across the sky? It's a weird, weird thing to become aware of this and to see it and to understand it, even at its most fundamental level. I've been using this example a lot with you folks, and I think it's something I'm going to be doing for probably the next year at least. I've been doing it like every other day, if not every day, which is to say, observe the world as if you were sort of an architect of worlds. You are a more native alien, and you've been sent down to help the society move forward in their intellectual development. That's you. And just observe everything sort of as that's kind of funny. Well, that's interesting. And as an alien, you wouldn't look at the Latin cultures worshiping the Day of the Dead, think, oh, how stupid. You wouldn't do that. If you're an alien, you look at it and go, oh, that's really creative. They're understanding that they're symbiotic beings. They understand that the dead isn't really dead. And they celebrate. They even dress up as the dead. Cute, nice, cool. It's got spiritual connections that are real. They haven't lost their roots. Oh, look at this other secular group that worships iPet Go 2. Is trying to convince themselves every single day that they've made the right decision, that they're just a bag of chemicals, and when they die, they just diffuse. Totally closed-minded to anything spiritual, so they never experience it. So for them, what if the greatest, I don't know, I don't even know if you call it a punishment, but what if the greatest gift of the universe is to say, well, whatever you believe, the moment that your body dies is the future that you get. It is the result that you get. You don't think that you go on? when you're not going to go on? Why do we need you on the other side if you don't think there's going to be a life after this death? We don't want to force anything on you. It is your right to believe that it's over. It's kind of sad because your kids and your family and your wife, they all think that there's something there because they were more open-minded and they actually get to enjoy the fruits of the afterlife. But you don't get to go because you didn't think anything was there. How interesting is that? And what if that was the way it was? Let's just play with that for 1 second. Imagine someone who felt sort of this paradox. And the paradox was the following. I don't like going to church. And I don't know if I believe any of this crap. But because I was taught this from youth, I kind of do. Then they pass away. However they pass away. And they find it's all true. But because they had the seed, that little tiny seed of believing it, they got the pass to go on to the next realm. And now they're looking down on this world, living in a pure cloud of love and light and just beyond amazing. Doesn't stop there, but they're definitely there to appreciate it. And they're like, wow, I am so glad I went to church, that I had some belief of something. And there's plenty of religions that don't have any connection with Christianity whatsoever. I mean, except for the virgin birth thing. That also said, what do you know, the Egyptians, you go over the river Styx and you ascend. That's still the same thing. Native Americans thought you became stars. The Japanese have shrines in their homes to pass messages to their loved ones, to honor them, because they believe their loved ones can hear it. Same thing, same domain, different interpretation, different lens, different filter to see it. Now, I think, hopefully, well, I don't even think, I'm hoping that even if someone dies a devout atheist, that they get the best Christmas gift they've ever had in their life. They're like, whoa. And I have to say, the people I've talked about that have last communicated, I've mentioned this a couple times recently, forgive me, the two guys that died that didn't know each other but said the same exact thing. They're pretty secular dudes. They had accidents. They went to that realm where someone said, no, it's not your time. Both of them got the same message. Jesus wasn't there, okay? And they said, come on back down. And they were both reporting in that they didn't like returning to their bodies because they were banged up. And one of them had, like, I think a year of rehabilitation. And they said, look, I will always believe from this point forward that there is an afterlife. I can't tell you much about it because I was only there for a few minutes, seconds, whatever it was. But it's wonderful. It's painless. And it was so much so that I didn't want to come back to my own body. Very, very interesting. At some point, we just have to listen to people because that, you know, if you're dead, how are you having an hallucination, right? An hallucination. I'm making up weird words. So, food for thought. Food for thought. Enlightenment can be very alarming at times. Maybe a little freaky, a little scary. But in the end, it is what is probably true. And we're all on a journey to try to get as much truth as possible. And on that note, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. I want to mention BitChute because I've been skipping my mention of BitChute. The membership count of BitChute just goes up. It doesn't go down. I might lose one for about 4 hours and then 10 people come on board. We're in like the 630s right now, which for the population over there is actually fairly good. With Facebook, with YouTube, we get the 5-pack reductions. We just had a 10-pack go, and it went in 2 5s. So we were at 53, and we went down to 43, and now we're up to 46, I think, today. So they're purging. But I also created that episode that was kind of cantankerous about God, so I think that probably freaked some people out, and they probably took off. And I do think that when I release a constant stream of videos, some of you really love that, and some of you get annoyed by having that in your feed a lot. So I apologize, but I'm not creating anything that is what I consider filler. I won't let that go through. So even though I'm cranking them out, I'm not just trying to get the episode or get the season done. I can't walk out here without an idea. But yeah, please go over to BitChute, create an account. That's the most important thing. If you subscribe, that'd be awesome too. But that's a group that has got it right. Freedom of speech, 2 gig limits on uploads, which suits us perfectly well for 1080p. I don't think they have 4K, but you really won't notice it on your TV. We play 1080p on a 4K television at the lounge all the time. We can't even tell. We can tell if we put a 4K on right after that, but that's about it. But we have everything else up there, the audio, the social media, all new remastered season 1. I am redoing some of the season 1s in this season that just need updates. They have bad mics. So you'll find a couple more of those coming out here before this video airs. I still have 2 Ether episodes that are just waiting to be edited. I need to just bite the bullet and do it. We do have some merch up there. So if you want to get a Deep Thoughts Radio shirt, all this kind of stuff up there, we have Deep Thoughts University up there too. You guys are purchasing it, so I appreciate it. It'd be cool to see any of you in the gear that you buy because you're separating with the money. And I do take the time to bring down the prices of what they want to sell it to you for, so I've probably halved the profit they want me to take from you buying it. Just keep that in mind. And for those of you who want to support the channel, it does make all the difference in the world. My camera is actually having some issues, so hopefully it gets over itself here. The shutter is having a bit of a problem right now. That would be a bad thing to have that die off. But yeah, we have Patreon and PayPal. So for all of you who donate, thank you so much. You're making it all happen. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now. Now, the Native Americans mirror the Americans of, the Indians of the, reset that.